Good evening. My name is Jessica Brogley, and you're joining a global GEG event. Tonight's topic is using Google Maps and primary sources to think like a historian. So tonight we're going to talk about how we can use the things we find in our community or in various places. I'll give you some tips tonight to be able to pair that with Google Maps or even Google Earth to be able to create some pretty transformative experiences for kids. So a little bit about me. My name, as you know, is Jessica. I am one of the leaders of Global GEG and the leader of GEG Southwest Wisconsin. I teach courses in educational technology in the School of Education at the University of Wisconsin-Platteville. I'm also a Google Education Certified Trainer and Innovator and a Street View Certified Photographer. I am also a Google Level 8 guide, which I highly recommend that you consider doing. Becoming a local guide really helped me understand the power of Google Maps and the idea that I can help shape that map. And so tonight, at the end of tonight's session, I'm going to give you some freebies that you can take and perhaps be able to use them with your students too. And there'll be primary sources that I've digitized, so stick with me. The picture you see on the right, I'm really proud of. I was one of 200 people selected in the world to attend Google's Connect Live 2019. And so basically Google had picked 200 of us from all thousands of people who applied to attend to go to Google's San Diego campus, actually San Jose. And we met with Google employees and really just enjoyed the process of leveraging Google Maps to tell the digital story of where we live. So I've got this passion for Google Maps, and I'm a huge history nerd, and I say that with the greatest affection. I love studying local history particularly. So tonight I'm going to kind of focus on that a little bit, but hopefully give you some inspiration for how you can use primary sources in your own classroom, in your own community. So I've got two screens kind of going on here. So if you see me look over here, I've got a second screen I'm trying to navigate and a bunch of primary sources sitting over here. So hopefully I will be able to juggle all this. So talking about primary sources, what's a primary source? That is the raw materials of history, the original documents and objects that were created under the time of study, right? So, and those can be digitized. And luckily we have so many sources now where things have been digitized for you to use in your classroom. We also practice the idea of thinking like a historian. I'm actually going to real quick pause here and drop my slideshow into the comment section. Hopefully that is a link that you can edit. We'll see, or not edit, access. And so the idea of thinking like a historian, you can find this from the Wisconsin State Historical Society, and download this. I've included a link to a PDF poster for your use. And I think framing your studies with students in this type of way is very helpful. It keeps you kind of grounded. That when we think about history, we ask a lot of questions. So we look at how an event or a place has changed, what has remained the same, how has it evolved or not. And then we look at turning points. How did past decisions or actions affect future choices? Like how has if this then that type of decisions impacted a location, for example. And then we look through the people that lived there, wherever that was. We look through what life was like at that time through their eyes. And then we also use the past to understand the present. And lastly, we look at cause and effect. What were the causes of past events and what were the effects of that? So I really would want you to inspire your kids to ask a lot of questions, even if you don't know the answer, and be ready to go on tangents, because when you use primary sources, that often does happen. Keep that in the back of your mind, that questions are a good thing and certainly welcome. So where do I find my primary sources? I was a high school English teacher for a long time, and but I had the fortune of teaching American literature for a while, and that really, I would say, was where I developed this spark for trying to find primary sources to use in the classroom. And I happen to love scavenging for stuff. So garage sales, things like that. I grew up with that stuff. So, and local history is just amazing to study. So you kind of you mix all that together, and here we are. So where do I find my favorite resources? Number one, auctions. So auctionzip.com is very helpful, and you don't have to spend a lot. Let's see, I'm just going to grab a few examples to show you. What I like to do is when you go to an auction, it's often like soda flats of boxes, and they're just full of papers. And a lot of people don't want that. They don't, that's not fancy glass. It's not collectibles they can sell on eBay. They don't know what to do with that. So those flats of newspapers often go super cheap. And you don't know what's buried in there. Like, I feel like it's a gold mine and I got to dig through it. And multiple times I've had that happen. I bought a box which really did look like junk. And when I grabbed it, I remember my dear husband he's with me at these, and he's like, oh geez. And the auctioneer, even a few times, he's doing his thing, and he looks over and he's like, oh, you're gonna bid on this. But here's the deal. Sometimes buried in the bottom of that box is a gold mine. For example, I found in the bottom of the box that I paid $1 for. At the bottom of the box was an entire stack of Life magazines and newspapers from the day JFK was assassinated. Very powerful find for me to land for a mere $1. This is another example. This is from the Chicago World's Fair. So these are original materials that were in this plastic. This was mixed in with a bunch of stuff. And I didn't bid on it. It just happened to be mixed in. And here it is, original documents from the Century of Progress, the Chicago World's Fair. And I'll talk about that in a little bit. Other examples, at antique store or an estate sale, you can often land something amazing. Antique stores, what have I bought from an antique store? Okay, this map. I'm from Platteville, Wisconsin, and this is a Chamber of Commerce map that outlines why Platteville is so amazing. And it's from the 70s. It's from 1970. And it's very interesting to see like what they thought was important back then and decided to feature. And most of these buildings featured in this brochure have changed. So that was $1.25, $1.50, a whopping $1.50. Then from an estate sale, I picked up an original. Platteville had a train that ran through our town, and I'll get to that in a little bit too. But I picked up a ticket to ride the train at an estate sale for just a couple bucks. And it comes with, I don't know what this is, but it's good for 10 cents at Matthews Wayside, wherever that was on the journey. But you start imagining, like, what would that be like? This ticket was $1. And it was good for anywhere I needed to go. You just start bumping into this stuff, and it can be pretty impactful. So antique stores, flea markets, estate sales, but also understanding you might be short on money, or you don't necessarily like have the same passion and curiosity to spend your money that way. You can land free items too at your local historical society. For example, in Platteville here, we have the Southwest Wisconsin room at the University of Wisconsin-Platteville, and they have a ton of information, and they can scan it all in high res, or you can there to have for your own use. And that, I would think lots of communities have some kind of resource like that. Even in Grant County, the county I live in, we have the Grant County Historical Society and the Rollo Jameson Museum. So several historical museums that do keep track of stuff like that. You also could turn to online repositories like Newspaperarchive.com. Now, It's not free. However, there's a good chance you might have access for free. For example, all students and employees, professors, right, like our teachers, we have access to that resource for free. We just have to log in with our university credentials. And so I bet there's a good chance some of you might have paid for access to something like that. And Newspaperarchive is going to allow you to search through decades of digitized newspapers. And you'll be able to read. I've especially liked it when I'm researching genealogy. I can find wedding announcements, anniversary announcements, but I can also find a ton of stuff about the history, local history in my community, in my state, my region, in the nation. Google Arts and Culture is also I did not know that it would have such quality photos that it does. You definitely, I mean, I've seen Google Arts and Culture many times, but I didn't think little old Platteville would be on Google Arts and Culture. And so I did a quick search, and the photos are phenomenal, and I have never seen them before. They're outstanding. So I highly recommend you just search for your community or whatever you're trying to gather a primary source for on Google Arts and Culture. And then turn to your local Facebook groups. Platteville, for example, has a really strong historical group where they just swap pictures back and forth that they find. And it's wonderful because people start sharing stories and reminiscing. Sometimes it's on what their grandparents told them. It just becomes this really nice collection. I'm sure that most communities have something like this. You just have to seek it out and find it. And turn to your local librarians, right? They also, I see Sandy Hayden's in here. And I'm also thinking of my favorite librarian at Platteville, Paige Leahy at Platteville Middle School. So we have all these connections, right? And Paige is a good example because she has this a passion for local history and architecture, and she archives and collects stuff too. So you just have to kind of ask around and figure out who's got this stuff, right? And then, of course, I end with your local history nerds. We're out there. And I say this with respect because we genuinely love talking about local history. So how do I make these items accessible to kids? Well, sometimes I use duplicate copies, and I don't have a sample. Sometimes I take an image and blow it up real big. So I'm going to try to, this is an image of a brewery in Platteville that was an original, it was just a picture, but I had it blown up using I went to mpix.com to have it blown up. And I actually had it printed on a sheet of metal because it's hanging in our house. I really love the picture. But, so you can literally have things made like that, or you can digitize them using Cam Scanner. So the link that I gave you is going to actually, I should try to copy link address, see if I can't paste this into the chat. The link I'm going to try to give you will give you the advanced access. So the regular Cam Scanner access puts a watermark on the scan, which honestly doesn't bother me, but this paid for version allows, let's see, no watermarks, and there are more advanced. You get all the advanced features. I think your files might be a higher resolution as well. So you might want to snag that too. I honestly use Cam Scanner for all sorts of reasons, but when you're trying to digitize stuff, having Cam Scanner handy on your mobile device can be very helpful. Okay, so I'm going to try to do this without closing out of my presentation. So I've got this picture here, and it's in Platteville, 1934. And I'd love to show this to kids, right? So let them figure out, where is this? And how do you know where it is? And it's going to take them a little bit. If you have any guesses, judging by what you see, right? Let's see if we can figure out, what is this a picture of? And so we start to unpack context clues with kids, right? Well, there's a bunch of horses and they've got a square. And I'll say this is in Platteville. So where are we, kids? Right? And so eventually I'm hoping that they are going to figure out it's the pool. And I picked somewhere like that because every kid has been to the pool in Platteville for the most part. And so I want them to start kind of looking around and seeing, and I'm going to try to do this without, okay, I'm a little nervous. Hopefully I don't close out of my presentation. All right, I want to bring up Google Maps on one side, and so I'm going to use an extension to split my screens here. Okay, that's good. All right. I can live with this. All right, and then I'm going to go to Google Maps. Okay. All right, so let's see if I can do this without collapse this menu here. All right, so I'm going to go over to the pool. And so what I want kids to do is try to compare and figure out what are they noticing. So sometimes I won't tell them. I want them to figure this out. And so productive struggle is not a bad deal. Just let it go. You don't have to give them the answer. So they're going to look and see, well, this is square. There's horses involved. What are they doing? Well, maybe they're digging. Are they digging this? It's a square, maybe. And hopefully some kid eventually, is this the pool? And then we're going to go look. So I want them to zoom over to the Platteville Aquatic Center, right? And we're going to zoom in. And then now usually I would have taken kids kind of through how to use Google Maps first, but this is a fine place to start with too. So I'm going to drag Pegman and drop Peggy down here on Sylvia Street and just let the kids kind of look around and see, well, it is a square. Kind of. Well, there's this house here with this really steep roof, right? So then some kid's going to start driving down the road here and look back and see, wait a minute, does that have a steep roof? And it's really hard to tell. But these kids have been by this a bunch, and they're going to know that this house right here, if you can kind of see where my cursor is moving back and forth, that matches this roof. So then the kids, I can see them start to peel together, or piece together, wait a minute, this roof, is that this roof? And then I'll say, well, what about this house? Where's that? Are you sure? So then some kid is going to drive around the corner and get to about here. We're going to back up a little bit. I actually drove too far forward. Turn around. Look at that, right? So we now know that this house and Street View here match. So we know that this house was built before 1934, right? And that indeed this is of their beloved pool, the Platteville pool. And we can then, there are plenty of postcards on eBay. I didn't put eBay on my list. If you Google your hometown and throw the word postcard after it, you're going to get postcards, right? This is Platteville Main Street. I have tons of these upstairs. And there's a really good postcard, floating around of the Platteville pool after it was redone. And the swimming pool, not swimming pool, the house, the changing house, I forget what it's called. Looks the same. And so the kids kind of get a charge over being able to see the evolution of a place. And so that's one example of how you can use Street View. And so, be thinking kind of as you go through the key places that your kids know in your community. And that all can be very, very helpful because in your searches, because it will give you some idea of what kind of stuff you should go find. So I'm going to pick another one. In Platteville, the kids all know the infamous Steve's Pizza. It is the pizza place in town that everybody goes to. And so I'm going to go zoom over. Well, we actually, Platteville is a pizza place. We have several. I got to give credit to Uno's Pizza, Domino's, and I forget Papa Murphy's. So we're kind of a pizza place, but a lot of our students know and appreciate Steve's Pizza. So I'm going to zip over there to Steve's Pizza. So there's City Hall. Here we go. Here's Steve's Pizza. And so I'm going to show this picture to the kids here. And this building, so this is from 1895. 1895. And so I wouldn't say a word about this. Just let them look and see if they can figure out where this is. Now, I think they're going to be pretty good at it, but I do see some, it was, as you can see on the screen, it says furniture and undertaking. So I imagine there's going to be some extra learning going on here when they figure out what that is. And that over time, this building has evolved into something else. So they'll figure this out and drag Pegman to the street view here and spin around. And there it is. Cool, right? Right. So they can see their favorite pizza place side by side with this picture. Right. And so we'll talk about that. And I imagine there will be, because we start getting into then figuring out, this started out as a furniture and an undertaker. What? Like there's some learning to go there. Right. And eventually, right, we'll kind of show how this picture evolves. So this is from the 1950s. The building evolved into a Montgomery Ward's, which this is the version of Amazon in the 50s, right? If any of you are old enough to remember Montgomery Ward catalogs, I remember looking at the Montgomery Ward's catalog at my grandma and grandpa's before Christmas, so excited and dreaming about all the stuff I could get. And then eventually it became the JCPenney's catalog. And the Sears Roebuck, like there's a couple, right? So the Montgomery Ward building is a big deal historically. Like people remember in these historical Facebook groups I participate in, they give me lots of information. So by joining those types of groups, you too as the educator will get access to the stories that go behind the photos. So we'll talk to the kids about, okay, what's a Montgomery Ward, and how did people get goods to their homes at that time? And then eventually we might show them, right, what it evolved to in the 90s. So this is Heiser Hardware, and Heiser Hardware is still a store. It's at the other end of Main Street in Platteville. But we might look at how the structure of it has changed. And so it's all covered, right? Beautiful structure, and they covered almost all the whole front. So the kids will be really interested in that. And we can also then, I usually teach them the Street View timeline earlier than this, but they still like it if they have never learned it. So I show them to click on this clock here and zip back in time to see how this building has evolved. Now in Platteville, they have not come by a lot, just 3 times, the Google car that is. And so there isn't a lot to show, but in your community, you might be able to find a little more evolution of a space or a location. But we certainly can see just in the short time period of the past 10 years or so, or 20 years, how this building has been preserved, right? From where we see it in this image to where it is today. And it's interesting to see how it's evolved historically by looking at these pictures. So I will use these primary sources with students, right? And so do this for your community too, or it wouldn't have to be your community, but just somewhere you're wanting to teach or use it as part of historical learning. Whoops. So yes. Yeah. So Irma, you say maybe the children could have some sort of guessing game and take the turn to screen share. Absolutely. Wouldn't that be fun? You could absolutely build a game using Google Slides, for example. There is a tool called GeoGuessr. I do have a paid for account for that, but it's not free. And kids it's not free for me to make, and the kids only can play it for free for once a day. So it's not one of those tools that I with all my heart mention, because there's this freemium quality about it. But GeoGuessr does allow you to make games where they guess a location and get points accordingly. So you may want to check it out if you're curious about it. It's just not free. So Irma, I really like your suggestion of maybe using Google Slides to get that job done. Yeah, Steph. So I would encourage you to click on that clock I've really enjoyed studying the evolution of a location over time by just jumping backwards in time to see how things have evolved, or how urban sprawl or development in a city, building of skyscrapers, or natural disasters. So if one particular area would be the lower Ninth Ward in New Orleans, is really interesting to do, to go back in time and look at how that location has evolved. Um, and so wherever you're studying, make sure you do street view, drop peg man on that street, and then click the clock to see where you've ended up. So I bought this map. Okay, I'm going to try to close out of this. Hopefully I'm doing okay. I bought this map at an antique store. And whew, okay, and it's from the 1970s. So here it is. So I should not be throwing these away. I use Google Maps for everything. So when I find these, I pitch them. Matter of fact, a friend of mine still uses an atlas, and I tease her for it. But these are really valuable because you can see how a space has evolved over time and start asking those questions. How has that evolution impacted communities? So on this map, and I've given you a screenshot here, we are missing, this is before, in my region, this is before Highway 151, which has connected us to Madison, our capital. And so back in the day when my husband was a kid, they had to, from Platteville, go through all these little towns. So Belmont, Mineral Point, Dodgeville, Ridgeway, Barneveld, and eventually get to Madison, a very long trip on 2-lane highways. And so the kids, first of all, their geography skills in general, their mapping skills aren't so great. They don't look at a lot of maps like this. So it'll take some practice. But what I like to show them is Google time lapse. So I should actually call it Earth Engine time lapse. I'm going to copy and paste this into the comment section. Okay, so what this is, you can't zoom in real close, but I'm doing okay here. I'm able to look at Platteville, and I'm starting at 1984. So this brochure is 1970. So I'm going to let kids kind of figure this out, how this land has evolved. Okay, so I'm going to press play. And you can kind of see, here we are, 95, 97, 2000. Oh, what changed, right? So now there's some conversations to be had. And this is going to keep looping over and over again. And, I'm using this to talk about transportation with kids. But could you imagine the various layers of study that could exist with this tool, using a primary source and looking at a time lapse of Google Earth, right? It's not just about transportation. I can look at the growth of an area, even the change in agricultural practices, right? So lots of different opportunities just using this one tool. So looking at maps, I found on this Facebook group, I wish I did not find it. A kind individual had posted it. And so he had posted a map of the railroad bed in Platteville. So of course, I'm going to bring up another map here. And so I was able to find the location of this map. And let's see, where am I going to go by? Well, I'll just go Platteville. And then I'm going to zoom in to where I am looking I'll take the map and sort of compare locations. Hopefully I can figure this out. Let me zoom in a little bit. There we go. Okay. So the kids really don't understand. They don't, the railroad has been gone for a very long time. So I can get to right about here, and I start comparing. So I'll have the kids, okay, Ann Street, Commerce Street, Main Street. What do we got here? Ann Street, Commerce Street, Main Street, right? So now we can start to figure this out. And the depot was at the intersection of Main Street and Commerce, Main Street and Commerce. So right about here. So then I usually teach the kids to flip into satellite mode and see where the railroad bed was. So now you can kind of see it, right? How cool is that? But then I'm going to have the kids dig in a little bit deeper. So it's wonderful that they can figure out where the railroad went through. And I'll tell you, our local historical society has all sorts of documents from the time the railroad was here and what it provided this community. But then I like to have them kind of look a little bit closer at this map and do a deeper dive to have them look to see, okay, wait, we had a lumber shed. Lots of lumber. So can you guess what business was probably right here, right? A lumber yard, right? And so then we've got another depot and a coal shed. So there's something brought to Platteville. Now, one thing I cannot find on this map that I'm sure is a factor, Platteville was a mining community. We mined zinc and lead. And I'm quite certain there has to be evidence of that somewhere on here. I just didn't find it yet. And so I see stockyards. That makes sense. And more lumber yards. So I let the kids kind of do a little digging, right? Using this map. But now at some point, somebody's going to say, wait a minute, what's this? If you zoom out just a little bit, something changed, and I don't have the answer to this yet. Something changed in this community that this never became a subdivision. So now we start, do you see how you're going to have like tangents all over the place with this type of research, and you might not know the answer, and that is great. That is perfectly fine. That's a really fantastic opportunity for the kids to start looking at their own inquiry and finding sources for their own research. So that's one thing I'm kind of hanging on to. Hopefully I can figure that out someday. So what if you want to do a little searching? I'm going to bring up this as an example just because it's one of my favorite finds by happenstance. I found in the bottom of those boxes this packet here from A Century of Progress, the International Exposition of Chicago. And what actually started this was this picture. So my mother-in-law had given this picture to my husband, and it's a thermometer with a picture, and it says souvenir of A Century of Progress of Chicago 1934. And then she proceeded to tell me the story of how her dad went down there with the guys and they hung out and like they had a great time. They drove down there for the day, or they took a train, I think, and spent the day down there. And I didn't know anything about this. So then, sure enough, right, at some auction, I believe, I picked this up, and I thought it was a perfect compliment for me to learn about the event that he went to. And so what you could do, though, is start showing this to kids. So, for example, this document here comes with a map. And so this is just the first picture, but here is the map of where the World's Fair was created. And so you can zoom in on these locations real close and then come over to Google Maps and try to have the kids plot them today. So I can, if I can do this, Chicago Mile, we'll just try that and see what I find. Magnificent Mile. And then zoom way out and then come down here by shed. And yep, I can see it. So if you could turn this map sideways, do you see the lagoon here and how that matches here? So then I can have the kids zoom in on these locations to be able to figure out which buildings stayed and which were taken down. I think that for me was an epiphany, like that they ripped all this stuff down. So the brochure that I was given, which is a phenomenal, it's just such a great resource here, has, it's 84 miles of exhibits. And so this brochure here outlines why the World's Fair was created, what would the purpose was, the celebration of our innovation and achievement in the world, and the different locations you could go to, and the different exhibits on the back. So it becomes this like really, it could be a pretty robust experience for kids being able to figure out, okay, this building was this. What was its purpose? There's a book here that this is like a huge kind of asset to the project. Here's the Chicago Fair book, and each page, I'm so lucky that I found this, each page explains what one of those locations are. So the kids would be able to learn, why did we celebrate that? What was the significance? And what did it become? Did it stay? For example, the art museum or sheds, right? Those stayed, but the others were destroyed or taken down within days. So very interesting to kind of examine. And that's not necessarily local. It's just pretty interesting. So we should talk about, I'm going to close out of this. All right. I'm not too shabby at weaving through this without tanking this. All right. So I gotta go back to Montgomery Ward's, because that spurred some really interesting research, in that I was at an antique store and found this. This is an original catalog from Montgomery Ward's. This is the Amazon. This is Amazon right here, from 1930, where you could order anything and have it shipped to you. And eventually, we developed Montgomery Ward stores throughout the nation. And so this book, this catalog, is from 1930. And so, wow, what a rabbit hole of learning there. Kids can see the kinds of things that they purchased, what was important to a family or a business, and how much things cost. And you'll even find some things in the catalog that aren't legal today. There's a lot of lead paint for sale in that book, and other things like that. So it's that in itself is such a pleasant kind of way to weave in additional primary sources to a project that you were already working on. And so it's great that the kids just experience kind of what weaving in primary or navigating and interacting with primary sources, but you can also use tools to let kids show their understanding. So the two that came to mind for me right away would be Google Earth projects. And so that's the newest version. If you remember Tour Builder, I certainly would have covered Google Tour Creator, but it's being sunsetted. So Google Earth projects would be pretty comparable in a way. For example, I'm working on one right now covering all of the locations that my husband's ancestors lived in town, and then including photos, any old photos I can find of them in front of the house. To try to create this experience for someone. And you could also use Google My Maps too. That would actually be really useful too. That should be on my list. And the third one that I'm mentioning is ThingLink. So this is an example of one. It's not exactly fitting in that this isn't a map. So it's a floor plan of a historic home in Platteville. And I, along with a teacher, had taken kids there, and I managed to find the floor plan of the house, the original floor plan. So, and then when you hover over, you get videos that the kids made. So I won't play them. That goes to first and second floor, and hovering over these results in a playable YouTube video. And so you would have to kind of imagine this. Okay, wait, what if it were a map? And my kids had videos explaining something, right? The historical significance of a location. And their research came from primary sources, maybe something like that. So there are lots of great Google tools, or for example, ThingLink is not a Google tool, but it's still a fantastic resource. And also getting kids to articulate their understanding using Flipgrid, right? So you've got all sorts of opportunity there. So I think I've covered an awful lot. I do want to talk, I want you to be thinking here about connecting with me if you ever want to talk primary sources. And I promised some freebies, didn't I? I'm going to forget that. So I'm going to drop into the chat window. a link to my website where you're getting, hopefully these all pop up. If they don't, I'll fix them. A freebie map to the Chicago World's Fair, including some historical information, teaching resources, and videos. If you're curious, what was this? Because it wasn't just about Chicago, it was a global project. Okay. And so you can see the map, get a copy of the map yourself. And then the brochure that I liked so much is from the World's Fair. So what I did is I scanned using Cam Scanner the brochure in such a way that when you print it out, you can make your own brochure, okay? Piece by piece like that. And so you'd have that. And then I scanned the Chicago World's Fair booklet that I was celebrating before, and it contains all of the locations in the Chicago Fair. And then also, last but not least, and this took so long, I scanned 140 pages of the Montgomery Ward catalog for you to see for yourself. So it's more than half of this for you to have and look through and enjoy. And even if you don't end up teaching any of this, the Montgomery Ward catalog to me is a clutch steal that hopefully you can, if not for your own enjoyment, maybe use in the classroom someday. All right, let me scooch on back. There we go. So I would love the opportunity to connect with you on Twitter, and be sure to follow Global GEG for more great events. You can find me on Twitter at jbroglie. And if you have any questions, be sure to let me know. Find me on Twitter. Yes, Mel, that was 140 pages. I finally gave up at 140 before I didn't want to scan anymore. But I promise you, I intentionally scanned some really cool stuff that I think you're going to get a kick out of seeing. Yeah, Sandy, I think, you mentioned that your grandfather went to the Chicago World's Fair. Many stories. Yeah, that is something that I think, regionally our ancestors were close enough to hitch a ride or grab a train and head down there. So there's all sorts of opportunities for collecting those or thinking about those stories that you may have enjoyed growing up. So I will, if anyone didn't, I see Javier, you need access to the first doc. I'll make sure I redo that and give everyone access to those documents. So if you have any questions, you can drop them in the chat, or you're welcome to find me on Twitter, where I would love to talk with you. So until then, keep researching, keep finding your local resources, and be sure to check out Global GEG for more events. Take care. Bye-bye.